I'd like to talk a little more tonight about, in terms of drinking from the well of being. We've talked about resting as essential, and sort of like stop the forward movement towards something you feel like you have to get to be okay, or to be, more than what you are. Just to stop, just to be with what is right now as it is. That sense of resting. So that's the first kind of step. And as you do that, there's more ballast to the present moment. There's more presence, you could say. More presence here as you fully stop and rest. And then, we talked last week about joy, which is a certain thing that deepens this quality. Joy is not like I was using the word happiness to be those things that we pursue, which definitely don't keep us at rest. Whereas joy is something that spontaneously arises just in being with what is and meeting it. So there's a kind of a engagement of the heart, shall I say, with what is, that's fuller in joy than there is in just resting. There's an energy there. You're bringing some of the heart energy into the experience and taking it in. And I didn't mention it last week, but I think it might be worth mentioning that I sort of put sorrow in this category too. Joy and sorrow belong together in a certain way. They're both about the heart's engagement with what's happening. Oftentimes, Buddhism, because it focuses on ending suffering, doesn't give a lot of, positive spin, shall we say, to sorrow. But from the point of view of the heart coming alive, it can be really important. As the heart comes out of numbness, comes out of withdrawal, there can be pain. And the feeling of the pain, there's a joy to it. And it's one of the ways that I sometimes distinguish for people the difference between a kind of a depressed pain and a teariness that goes with just kind of being depressed, and the kind of tears that make you come alive, the kind of sorrow that feels like the heart releasing itself into the pain of something, into the experience of something. Is there life in it? Is there life in your tears? And so there can be a certain sense of joy in actually feeling pain about something you've been numb to. You can feel yourself coming alive. And of course, there's also tears of joy. I mean, those are, of course, included. And tears of, shall we say, love or poignancy, when you think about something that touches you deeply. Often the response, at least in some people, my wife and I are kind of teary people, so this may not apply to everybody, but sometimes your eyes well up and you feel a fullness. And the word joy might not be the first one you reach to talk about that, but love might. But it's pointing to the engagement of the heart with what's present, and the way that the particular intelligence of the heart, which is about perceiving value, perceiving goodness, comes alive in these experiences. And then ironically, I may have talked a little bit about this last week, but I'll say a little bit more tonight. Ironically, we really resist this experience of joy and grief. It's a little more understandable why we would resist grief, because we're afraid of pain. We're afraid of actually letting things touch us. But it's kind of harder to understand when we see that we don't want sort of joy to touch us too much. It could be because we've already hardened our hearts to the pain, and when the heart's closed, it can't feel joy either. So that's a big reason why it doesn't happen. But there's also the case that when we are joyful, there's a kind of letting go that we resist as, shall we say, egos, as selves that want to be in control of their experience. There's something about the openness of joy that can feel uncomfortable to us. As I said, I think when I first taught you the little, kind of bringing your energy down to your heart technique, that oftentimes there are two things that you'll hear inside that will come up around doing this, like bringing more energy into the heart center. The first is, this isn't real, which, can come out of our training as Westerners about believing what's real. Energy isn't really necessarily acknowledged broadly in the Western context as real, even though it's such a crucial part of meditative experience. It doesn't get much play. So you may not, initially get that, but the mind may be saying that not because of a belief. It may be saying it because of the second thing that you often hear inside when you bring energy down into the heart. This isn't safe. There can be a feeling of it's not safe to be in the heart because the heart feels. And sometimes in our lives, we have, probably not consciously, but maybe consciously, chosen not to feel in order to survive a situation that would have been too painful to go through without, if we really had to feel it. And it's also the sort of the nature of feeling that some things, especially the hard things, are hard to feel if you're not accompanied. In other words, it takes another human being sometimes for us to be able to feel what the heart is holding. It's why it's so valuable to have a friend, have a spouse, have a therapist, have someone who you can talk about that with. And which leads me kind of to a third thing dimension of this, of drinking from the well of being, that I wanted to talk about tonight and introduce, though it's probably nothing new. That's not news to anybody. And that's connectedness. That is really essential to the experience of being. And so one of the ways that I'll articulate that, I'm going to take a bunch of different stabs at it, because it's a vast topic, really, to try to lay out and explain. But one of the ways that I think of it is that when you look in the heart, everybody's in there, Everybody who's been important to you in your life is in there. Important for better or worse, really, not necessarily just the totally positive people, but sometimes people who have been difficult are also there. I've noticed how it's not uncommon for my parents to kind of show up in my heart. I think of them frequently. But also other people just kind of show up in various circumstances. And it's a funny way that I feel witnessed inside, in these sorts of encounters. And in a way that's also kind of hard to explain. Even the people you ignore are kind of in there. And even your enemies are in your heart in some way. Which is why, at least in Buddhism, the practice of not having enemies is so important. So if you really want to be living in your heart, having enemies in there is kind of troublesome. It kind of separates you from the best of yourself. And yet, it's not an easy thing to not have enemies. And enemies being anyone to whom you feel aversion, anyone to whom there's a sense of, gosh, I wish you wouldn't exist. And it seems that they sprout up everywhere. in life. So it helps if you begin to acknowledge that they're all in there. And the reason why they're coming up at certain times is that they're in there, you know. The person who is causing you some trouble somewhere, your mind circles back around. They're in there. And so there's some way that at least is acknowledging the connectedness of the heart. The heart doesn't separate itself from things. It's part of its beauty. It's part of its, shall we say, difficulty. It's not easy to be human. It really isn't. And these hearts don't necessarily come with instruction manuals, though the Dharma is doing the best it can to give you one. The other way that I kind of want to take this topic in terms of the connectedness is I think about this class. And one of the things that I notice about it is how the presence of everybody in this class creates a kind of a group awareness, shall we say, the conversations that we have. And some of you I know have been coming for years. There's something that it's doing for you. That's what it tells me. There's something that it really gives to you. And sometimes I think people will put it all on me. You know, we like to listen to you, Mark. You have good things to say. But from my perspective, you all have good things to say. And it's your willingness to show up authentically, genuinely, honestly in the dialogue that often draws forth something from me in response, draws forth the response. I frequently have this sort of feeling like when I'm saying something, like kind of going, I didn't know I knew that. You know, I didn't know I had that clarity. But there's something about the authentic question that it comes through me. And other things that I find myself saying, it's sort of like, oh, Mark, you're actually teaching that to yourself right now. You should listen to yourself, you know? There's something coming through that's really important to hear. And then I also noticed that sometimes in people's shares, they will provide like something extra to what I've said that was missing. It's sort of like in the group field. Sometimes something will arise in your heart that needs to be said to everyone. And so, our minds do funky things with that. They like say, oh, I'm not important. And nobody really wants to hear my question, or my question's stupid. Or, these are things that the mind says to itself. They say it to me too. So that's why I know they say it to you. But the truth is, I think that what comes up here is often what's needed there. And that applies to everybody who's present. It's one of the powerful things about a group. It's one of the powerful things about a community. And while it would maybe be a stretch to call this community, where we don't necessarily see each other all the time in person, it is in a certain way. It's that we have spiritually kind of opened ourselves to each other. And there's alchemy there. There's an alchemy that happens. And we are greater than we are as individuals in this way. There's kind of an open secret. And as I stated, it's not going to surprise anyone, but I think it's just worth saying is that whenever you open yourself and let us see who you really are, whether that's in joy, whether that's in vulnerability, however it is, it opens our hearts too. It's contagious. Presence is contagious. And so your presence is not just for yourself. It's a gift to everybody that you encounter. You're actually being in the moment, paying attention, and being engaged from the heart is of great value to everyone that you meet. And the cool thing is you don't have to talk about it. I'm talking about it here because that's what we do here, is we talk about. Sometimes I think like, Mark, all you ever say is the obvious. But sometimes the obvious doesn't get said. It doesn't get said enough about what we're really about as human beings. The obvious doesn't get said. And so, like the gift that we give to each other when we're just ourselves and we open and we give words to what it's like to be us, for better or worse, for for sorrow or joy, when we give words to what it's like to be us, everybody's world gets a little larger. And most of the time, you recognize yourself in what people say. We human beings aren't that different, are we? Once in a while, maybe somebody has an experience you can't relate to. That's fine. We all do. We all have those sorts of things. But most of the time, there's something about, the essence of being a human being that it's shared. And we like touching it and being touched by it. So, that's nourishing on the deepest level. So when we're drinking from the well of being, I don't want to have some sort of individualistic interpretation of that it's just what we do in solitude, though there's a lot of it too. Though, even in solitude, everybody's in there with me. It's like the heart is full of all sorts of things. But we waken together. We're waking each other up. Sometimes we wake each other up by being difficult for each other. Even though we don't like that. We don't like that at all. It is like each kind of difficulty is an invitation to show up. So I refer back to my little mantra that I taught you to say in difficult situations. I really want to be here for this. It works, I think. This saying works because it touches something deeply true about the heart. I think on the deepest level, the heart wants to show up for whatever happens here. All sorts of other layers of us might not. Let's acknowledge that. All sorts of other layers of us might want to run screaming from certain experiences of being human, whether it's embarrassment or whether it's kind of being oppressed by whatever powers are over you. We gripe and we grumble, and sometimes we rightly address it because it needs to be addressed. But I think on the deepest level, our hearts are willing to meet whatever arises in our experience, no matter how horrific. There's something in us that's here to know whatever arises inside of us. And it's that level of our heart that constitutes awakening. That's what we awaken to. We awaken to a place that's kind of beyond all reason. Reason is kind of aligned with, no, I don't want this. It shouldn't be this way. This is bad. There's good and bad in this world. On a certain level, they're absolutely true. They're absolutely here. But I want to name and invite you to the level of the heart that is willing to show up for whatever. And kind of will anyway, even if most of us is kicking and screaming. There's still something quietly witnessing, quietly being touched by whatever happens, even if we've closed our eyes, even if we've numbed ourselves. It's all in there anyway. All the injustices around us, and particularly the ones we participate in, they're all in the heart. They're all in us anyway. That's kind of sobering. It's kind of liberating too. So I really want to be here for this. Think of what's going on right now that needs that phrase desperately. From the micro to the macro, from just the situation in your little personal world to the whole world and everything in between. What gets cursed by you, by the other kind of levels of your being, that you might just drop in this phrase and see if this phrase will take you down like an elevator, take you down like a stone plopped in a well to something inside the heart of the heart, which can say, I want to be here for this. I came here to witness it all. To witness it all with love. Give it a try. Give it a try when your TV is on. Give it a try when the news is on. Give it a try when your partner has a complaint about you. Give it a try when your child won't talk to you. Give it a try when your best friend dies. I really want to be here for this. And if it works for you, I know this kind of stretches some people's belief, but I came here for this. Works for some people. But I think the more universal one is I really want to be here for this. And let that phrase, let something in you find the place where that phrase is true. And in looking for the place where that phrase is true, let the other voices also speak that say, like, no way, this shouldn't be. I don't want this. Take this away. I'm not a practicing Christian, but I believe this is what the story of Jesus on the cross is saying, where he asked it to be taken away. I think he's kind of modeling this. It's my sense of it. Of like finding the place that came here for this, came here for something that the rest of us like, no. And start with the things that are maybe not the biggest for you. Start with littler things and see if you can find this. And somewhere in that heart of the heart, where we actually are willing to witness whatever arises inside of us and whatever arises inside of people around us is where we find the deepest connectedness, the deepest wisdom of the heart, where we're willing to be there for our own suffering and for others, individually or collectively, doesn't really matter. It's a profound practice. It just cuts through this belief, this seductive belief that our culture offers that what we're really here for is to have and to get. Whatever the good stuff is, whatever you consider the good stuff to get, what we're really here for is to have those things and get those things and avoid all the other things. And, I mean, you can live like that, but what does it lead to? If your heart is open, there's all the having and getting that it could ever want in the simplest things. And truly, all the having and getting is just the receiving of what's really already in your world. And in the connectedness that's there. So, just plant this idea that, awakening is it's a group endeavor. We're helping each other. We're helping each other wake up. It's a group endeavor, and you don't really know entirely what role you're playing for other people in this drama. You don't entirely know what role you're playing. I get this role, Dharma teacher, which kind of like advertises itself as a certain thing about being here to help people wake up, but you never actually know what will wake you up. And I'm just kind of priming the pump. I'm just trying to kind of get you going in the right direction. And because I know that life's doing its work too. Life's doing most of the work in the things that it's bringing you, in the challenges that it offers, in the love that comes your way, and the love that goes out from you. All those things. So connectedness, the theme for this week. So as you go out from class this week, as last week was about enjoyment, explore connectedness this week. The well of being, which is connectedness. Like what people are really offering and doing in your life. And wake up there a bit. And as a part of that too, try out my little phrase with some of the things that are difficult. I really want to be here for this. And come back and tell us what you notice. Come back and tell your stories. Your stories are great. They feed us all. All right.